They say the lowest rank in a wolf pack is the Omega, but the truth is, the lowest rank is the Forgotten. When the Silver Creek pack stripped Rowan of her cloak and shoved her into the blizzard, they didn't just banish her. They sentenced her to freeze to death on the side of Blackwood Mountain. They thought she was weak. They thought she would die quietly in the snow. But fate is funny. Sometimes the thing you throw away is the only thing that can save a kingdom. Rowan didn't find death in that cave. She found 12 monsters, and by morning she would be the most powerful woman in the world. This is the story of how a reject became a queen. The winter of 2024 had hit the Blackwood territory harder than any season in living memory. The frost wasn't just on the ground. It was in the hearts of the Silver Creek pack. Resources were thin, tempers were short, and when a pack is hungry, they look for a scapegoat. Rowan knew she was the easiest target. As an Omega with no family name and no mate, she was the dust under the rug of the pack house. She scrubbed the floors of the grand hall until her knuckles cracked and bled. She cooked meals she wasn't allowed to eat, and she kept her head down. But silence doesn't save you when people need someone to blame. It happened on a Tuesday evening, just as the sun was dipping below the jagged peaks of the mountain range. "Thief!" The shriek tore through the kitchen. Rowan dropped the tray of silverware she was polishing, the metal clattering loudly against the stone floor. She spun around to see Felicity standing there, her finger pointed like a loaded gun. Felicity was beautiful in a sharp, cruel way, and she was currently warming the bed of Alpha Sterling. That made her untouchable. "I didn't take anything," Rowan stammered, her voice trembling. "I was just setting the table for the evening meal." "Don't lie to me, rat," Felicity hissed, stepping forward. She reached into the pocket of Rowan's oversized, ragged apron, a pocket Rowan knew was empty moments ago, and pulled out a glittering silver bracelet. It was an heirloom of the Sterling family. The kitchen staff gasped. The evidence was damning, even though it was clearly planted. Before Rowan could protest, the heavy oak doors swung open. Alpha Sterling walked in, radiating a dark, suffocating aura. He was a large man, broad-shouldered with a jagged scar running down his left cheek, a souvenir from a border skirmish years ago. He looked at the bracelet in Felicity's hand, then at Rowan. "Stealing from the Alpha's bloodline," Sterling rumbled, his voice devoid of pity. "In times of famine, theft is treason." "Alpha, please," Rowan begged, dropping to her knees. The stone floor was freezing. "I didn't take it. She put it there. I've served this pack since I was a pup. I would never—" "Silence!" Sterling roared. The command forced Rowan's wolf to submit, bowing her head against her will. "I'm tired of your weakness, Rowan. You contribute nothing. You are an extra mouth to feed. And now, a thief." He grabbed her by the collar of her thin tunic and dragged her through the hallways. The pack members gathered, watching with eyes that held no sympathy, only relief that it wasn't them. They dragged her to the heavy iron doors at the edge of the compound. Outside, the blizzard was a white wall of death. The wind howled like a dying animal. "The law states a thief loses a hand," Sterling said, looking at the blizzard. "But I am feeling generous. I will leave you intact. But you are no longer Silver Creek. You are rogue. If you are found on my land by sunrise, my warriors will hunt you for sport." "Sterling, please," she whispered, tears freezing instantly on her cheeks. "It's 10 below zero. I have no coat. This is murder." He leaned in close, his breath smelling of expensive brandy. "Then die quickly, Omega. Do us all a favor." He shoved her, hard. Rowan stumbled down the icy steps and fell into the snow. The heavy iron door slammed shut behind her, the lock clicking with a sound of finality. She was alone. Rowan stood up, her body already shaking violently. She wore only a thin grey tunic and leggings. No boots, just worn sneakers that were soaked through in seconds. She looked back at the warm, glowing windows of the pack house, where Felicity was likely laughing, trying on the bracelet she had recovered. Rowan turned her back on them. Anger flared in her chest, a hot, burning coal that kept the cold at bay for a moment. I won't die, she thought. I won't give them the satisfaction. She began to walk. She couldn't stay near the border. The patrols would kill her in the morning. She had to make it to the neutral lands, through the Dead Man's Pass. It was a suicide mission, but staying was a death sentence. She trudged into the white void, the wind tearing at her hair, whispering that it was time to sleep. 3 hours later, Rowan couldn't feel her feet. Her vision was tunneling, the edges blurring into grey. The blizzard had intensified, turning the world into a chaotic swirl of ice and darkness. She was stumbling more than walking, her body shutting down, preserving heat for her vital organs. She had reached the base of the northern cliffs, a treacherous area known for rock slides and bear dens. She needed shelter. Any shelter. Through the driving snow, she saw a dark fissure in the rock face. A cave. It was situated high up on a ridge, requiring a dangerous climb over slick, icy rocks. Rowan's fingers were numb, effectively useless claws. But she jammed them into the crevices, pulling herself up with the last reserves of her strength. She slipped once, scraping her shin badly, the scent of fresh blood immediately whipped away by the wind. With a final, desperate heave, she rolled over the lip of the cave entrance and collapsed onto the dry, dusty floor. The wind outside roared, but inside it was eerily quiet. It was warmer here, not hot, but out of the biting wind. She lay there for a long time, just breathing, trying to force her lungs to accept the air. As her senses slowly returned, so did her smell. She froze. The scent hit her like a physical blow. It was the smell of pine, rain, and blood. So much blood. And underneath that, the unmistakable musk of alpha wolves. Not one. Many. Rowan scrambled backward, her back hitting the cold stone wall. Her eyes adjusted to the gloom. Deeper in the cave, barely illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the storm, were shapes. Large, massive shapes. Wolves. There were 12 of them. They weren't ordinary wolves. These were monsters. Massive, primeval beasts with fur thick as armor. But they weren't attacking. They were sprawled across the cave floor in a chaotic jumble of limbs and fur. Rowan pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. A normal wolf was dangerous. A shifted alpha was lethal. 12 shifted alphas in a confined space? She had walked into a slaughterhouse, but nothing moved. She squinted, her fear slowly giving way to confusion. The wolf nearest to her, a russet-colored beast the size of a pony, was breathing in shallow, ragged rasps. A dark pool was spreading beneath its flank. She looked at the others. They were all injured. Some had deep gashes across their haunches. Others had burns that looked like they came from silver-laced incendiaries. They were unconscious or too weak to move. In the center of the circle lay the largest of them all. He was a creature of midnight, fur so black it seemed to absorb the little light in the cave. Even lying on his side, he was terrifyingly large. A nasty gash ran across his shoulder, oozing dark blood. Rowan's instinct screamed at her to run back into the storm. These were strange wolves, dangerous wolves. If they woke up, she would be a snack. But then the black wolf whimpered. It was a sound of pure pain, a sound that bypassed Rowan's brain and went straight to her heart. She was an Omega. It was in her DNA to nurture, to heal, to soothe. She had spent her life taking care of people who hated her. Could she really leave 12 living creatures to bleed out in the cold? Sterling would leave them, she thought. Felicity would leave them. I am not them. Rowan took a shaky breath and stepped forward. "Hello," she whispered, her voice cracking. A grey wolf near the back twitched, an ear but didn't rise. They were exhausted, drained of energy. Their healing abilities were failing. They needed warmth, and they needed their wounds cleaned, or infection would kill them before morning. She approached the massive black wolf first. Up close, the power radiating off him was immense, even in his sleep. He smelled like ozone and deep forest earth. "I'm not going to hurt you," she murmured, though she knew he likely couldn't hear her. She looked around the cave. She needed water and something to bind the wounds. She had nothing. Think, Rowan. Think. She remembered passing a frozen stream just 50 yards down the ridge. She could break the ice. But carrying it? She looked down at her sneakers. They were useless anyway. She untied them, wincing as the cold air hit her wet socks. She could use the rubber soles to scoop snow, or... No, that was stupid. Wait. In the corner of the cave, she saw remnants of an old camper's site. A rusted tin can. It was trash to most, but gold to her right now. She grabbed the can and scrambled back to the entrance. She packed it with clean snow from the ledge. She brought it back inside. How to melt it? She looked at the wolves. They were huge heaters. She moved to the black wolf, carefully tucking the tin can of snow against his uninjured side, right where the heat of his belly was strongest. "You have to help me help you," she whispered. While the snow melted, she assessed the damage. The gash on his shoulder was deep. It needed to be cleaned. She looked at her tunic. It was the only thing keeping her from nudity. But the bottom hem was already tattered. With a sharp tug, she ripped a long strip of fabric from the bottom of her shirt. Then another. She tore her leggings at the ankles. She was dismantling her own protection to make bandages. The snow in the can had turned to slushy water. She used a piece of cloth to soak it up. "This is going to sting," she told the sleeping giant. She pressed the cold, wet cloth to the black wolf's wound. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the cave floor. The black wolf's eyes flew open. They were gold. Not the yellow of a normal wolf, but molten, burning gold. He didn't snap. He didn't attack. He just stared at her. His gaze was intelligent, heavy, and analyzing. He looked at the Omega girl, shivering in her torn rags, cleaning his blood with hands that were blue with cold. Rowan froze, her hand hovering over his shoulder. "I'm helping," she whispered. "Please don't kill me." The wolf exhaled, a huff of air that smelled of iron. He laid his massive head back down on his paws, but his golden eyes never left her face. He gave a single, distinct thump of his tail against the stone floor. Permission. Rowan let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound, packing it with clean snow to numb the pain, and binding it tight with the strips of her tunic. Once he was tended to, she moved to the russet wolf, then the grey one. For hours she moved among the 12 beasts. She cleaned, she bound, she whispered soft lullabies that her mother used to sing before she died. She was exhausted, her own body screaming for rest, but the work kept her warm. By the time she finished with the 12th wolf, a smaller, white-furred male with a broken leg, she could barely stand. She stumbled back to the center of the cave. The cold was creeping back in. Her adrenaline was fading, and the hypothermia was returning to claim its due. She curled up on the hard stone, shivering violently. Her teeth chattered so hard her jaw ached. "At least I did something good," she thought, closing her eyes. "I won't wake up, but at least they might." She drifted toward the darkness. Suddenly, she felt movement. Something warm and heavy pressed against her back. Then something else against her front. She opened her eyes blearily. The massive black wolf had dragged himself over. He curled his giant body around her, creating a wall of living fur against the cold air. The russet wolf moved to her feet. The others shifted, tightening the circle. They were piling on top of her. It wasn't an attack. It was a puppy pile. They were sharing their body heat. Buried deep in the fur of 12 lethal predators, Rowan felt a warmth she had never known in the packhouse. The scent of the black wolf, ozone and earth, surrounded her. He rested his heavy chin gently on her ankle. For the first time in her life, the rejected Omega felt safe. And then she slept. Morning did not break gently over Blackwood Mountain. It shattered the darkness with blinding, reflected light off the fresh snow. Rowan woke to the sensation of heat. Suffocating, intense heat. She wasn't shivering. In fact, she was sweating. The coarse texture of wolf fur against her cheek was gone, replaced by something smoother, firmer. She shifted, groaning as the stiffness in her joints made itself known. Her hand slid across her chest, a hard, muscular, human chest. Rowan's eyes snapped open. The cave was no longer filled with wolves, it was filled with men. 12 naked, sleeping men. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. She scrambled backward, her back hitting the stone wall with a thud. The movement disturbed the man she had been using as a pillow. It was the Black Wolf. Now, he was a man who looked like he had been carved from granite. He had dark hair that fell over his forehead, a sharp jawline covered in stubble, and a body that was a map of violence. Scars intersected with intricate tattoos of ancient runes running down his arms. His eyes opened, those same molten, golden eyes. He didn't blink. He didn't yawn. He went from sleep to lethal alertness in a nanosecond. He sat up, his gaze locking onto Rowan. "Who are you?" His voice was a deep baritone, rough with sleep, but commanding enough to make the stones vibrate. Rowan pulled her knees to her chest, trying to cover herself. She was wearing tatters, just the top half of her tunic and the shredded remains of her leggings. I'm Rowan." The other men began to stir. They groaned, clutching heads and limbs. "Report!" the dark-haired man snapped, not looking away from Rowan. "A live alpha." A man with sandy blonde hair, the russet wolf, groaned from the left. "Shoulder is stiff but healing. The bleeding stopped." "Leg is knit," said the younger one who had been the white wolf. "It's tender, but I can walk." The dark-haired man looked down at his own shoulder. He saw the strips of grey fabric bound tightly around the wound. He touched the makeshift bandage, his fingers grazing the dried blood. Then his eyes travelled to Rowan's tunic, seeing the jagged hem where the fabric had been torn. He looked at her bare legs, blue-veined from the cold, and her feet, wrapped in nothing but socks. The realization hit him. The scent in the cave wasn't just wolf musk. It was antiseptic pine, old blood, and her, the scent of rain and fear. "You tended to us," he stated. "It wasn't a question." "You were dying," Rowan whispered. "I couldn't leave you." The man stood up. He was massive, easily 6'5", towering over everyone else in the cramped space. He didn't seem to care about his nudity. His focus was entirely on the small, trembling woman in the corner. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, stepping closer. Rowan shook her head. "No, I was cast out of my pack yesterday. I just found this cave." The man crouched down so he was eye level with her. Up close, he was terrifyingly handsome, but his eyes held a predatory edge that made her wolf whine in submission. "I am Dominic Thorne," he said quietly. Rowan stopped breathing. Dominic Thorne, the alpha of alphas, the king of the Northern Alliance. He was the ruler of all shifters on this continent. He was a myth, a bedtime story told to pups to make them behave. King Dominic eats rogues for breakfast, they said. King Dominic has never lost a war. She had just spent the night spooning with the king of werewolves. "Your Majesty," she squeaked, lowering her head to the dirty floor. "I didn't know, I swear." "Lift your head, Rowan," Dominic commanded. She obeyed slowly. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice softer now. "This is a dead zone. No one comes up here unless they are hunting or hiding." "I was exiled," she said, the shame burning her cheeks. "My Alpha Sterling of Silver Creek, he accused me of theft. He threw me out in the blizzard." A murmur went through the other men. "Sterling," Dominic repeated the name, tasting it like poison. "We were on our way to a summit near his territory when we were ambushed. Rogue hunters with military-grade silver explosives. Someone gave them our route. It was an inside job," the sandy-haired man, whose name was Sebastian, said as he stood up. "Only the regional alphas knew our path." Dominic's eyes darkened. Sterling knew. He looked back at Rowan. She was shivering again, the residual heat of the wolf pile fading in the morning chill. Dominic stood up and turned to his men. "Dress. We leave in 10 minutes." "Sire, we have no gear," Sebastian noted. "The blast took the convoy." Dominic looked around the cave. He walked over to the corner where the shadows were deepest. He shifted, a partial shift, just his hand turning into a massive claw, and slashed at a hidden cache in the rock wall. It wasn't a random cave. This was an old emergency drop point. He pulled out a duffel bag, dusty but intact. Inside were tactical clothes, not enough for everyone, but enough to cover the essentials. Dominic pulled on a pair of black cargo pants and a thick thermal shirt. He walked back to Rowan. He held out a heavy, fur-lined parka. "Put this on," he ordered. Rowan looked at the coat. It was fit for a king. "I can't. I'm just an Omega. I shouldn't wear—" "You saved the lives of the Obsidian Order," Dominic interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You saved me. If you had walked past this cave, the king would be dead this morning. You will wear the coat, Rowan." She trembled as she reached for it. He didn't let her take it. Instead, he wrapped it around her himself, his large hands lingering for a moment on her shoulders. He zipped it up to her chin. It swallowed her small frame, smelling of him and leather. "Can you walk?" he asked. Rowan tried to stand. Her legs wobbled. The exhaustion of the previous night, combined with the lack of food, made the room spin. She buckled. Dominic caught her before she hit the ground. He swept her up into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "You have no shoes," Dominic noted, looking at her wet socks. "And we are moving fast. Hold on." He turned to his men. The 12 warriors, now dressed in mismatching tactical gear, stood at attention. They looked battered, bruised, and dangerous. They looked at Rowan not with contempt, but with something she had never seen before: respect. "We go to Silver Creek," Dominic announced, his voice cold as the ice outside. "I believe I have a debt to collect from Alpha Sterling." The journey down the mountain was a blur of wind and motion. Dominic refused to let anyone else carry her. He moved with supernatural speed, navigating the treacherous icy crags with the grace of the apex predator he was. Rowan rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady, powerful thrum of his heart. It was a rhythm that seemed to calm her own racing pulse. "Why did he reject you?" Dominic asked, after an hour of silence. The wind had died down, leaving the forest eerily quiet. He said I was weak, Rowan murmured into the fur of his collar. He said I was an extra mouth to feed. His mate, well, his mistress, Felicity. She planted a bracelet in my pocket. He knew it was a lie. He just didn't care. Dominic's arms tightened around her slightly. He threw away a healer who can bind 12 alphas in the dark with nothing but rags and snow. Sterling is a fool. I'm not a healer, Rowan corrected. I'm just a cleaner. I scrub floors. You were a cleaner, Dominic said. Fate has a way of correcting mistakes, Rowan. Last night you passed a test that most warriors would fail. They reached the tree line where the snow began to thin. Waiting on the logging road was a sleek, black convoy of SUVs. The Royal Guard. They must have tracked the king's location once the storm interference cleared. Men in dark suits with earpieces swarmed toward them, weapons drawn until they saw Dominic. "King Thorn!" A frantic man in a suit ran forward. "We lost your signal for 12 hours. We feared the worst." "The worst almost happened, Elias," Dominic said, stepping onto the asphalt. He didn't put Rowan down. "Who is the girl?" Elias asked, eyeing Rowan's disheveled appearance. "This," Dominic said, his voice projecting so every guard could hear, "is the reason I am standing here. She is under my personal protection. If anyone looks at her with anything less than reverence, they answer to me." He walked to the lead SUV. A driver opened the back door. Dominic placed Rowan gently on the leather seat and climbed in beside her. "Where are we going?" Rowan asked, looking at the luxury interior. It was a world away from the cold stone floor. "Silver Creek," Dominic said, pouring a glass of water from a decanter and handing it to her. "It is time for breakfast." The Silver Creek pack house was buzzing with nervous energy. Alpha Sterling was pacing in his office. He had heard rumors of an explosion on the pass, but no confirmation of the king's death. Felicity was lounging on the sofa, playing with the silver bracelet she had stolen back. "Stop worrying, Sterling. If he's dead, the council will be in chaos. We can expand our territory while they fight for the crown." "It's not that simple," Sterling snapped. "If the king is dead on my territory, the investigation will be brutal." Suddenly, the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of heavy engines, many of them. Sterling ran to the window, his face drained of color. A convoy of 20 black armored vehicles was tearing up the driveway, flanking the main gates. They bore the crest of the royal house, a golden wolf on a black shield. "He's here," Sterling whispered. "Who?" Felicity asked, standing up. "The king." The front doors of the pack house were blown open, not by explosives, but by sheer force. The pack members in the hall screamed and scattered. King Dominic Thorn strode in. He was dressed in black tactical gear, looking like a god of war. Flanking him were the 11 members of the Obsidian Order, looking battered but very much alive. And walking right beside Dominic, clutching his hand like a lifeline, was a girl. She was wearing fresh clothes, jeans and a soft cashmere sweater that belonged to the king, but everyone recognized the face. Sterling froze at the top of the stairs. Felicity dropped the bracelet. "Rowan!" Felicity gasped. "How?" Dominic stopped in the center of the grand hall. The entire Silver Creek pack had gathered, sensing the overwhelming power radiating from him. They dropped to their knees, baring their necks in submission. Sterling walked down the stairs, his legs shaking. "Your Majesty, we are honored. We heard of an attack. We were preparing a search party." "Save your lies, Sterling," Dominic's voice boomed. It wasn't a shout. It was a thunderclap. "You knew the route. You sold it." "I would never," Sterling protested, sweat beading on his forehead. Then his eyes flicked to Rowan. "And why is this runt with you?" "She is a thief, sire. A banished traitor. Dominic laughed. It was a cold, terrifying sound. A thief? Dominic asked. He turned to Rowan. Is that true? Rowan stepped forward. Her heart was hammering, but the warmth of Dominic's hand gave her courage she didn't know she possessed. She looked at Felicity. I didn't steal it, Rowan said clearly. Felicity planted it because she hates that the pack likes my cooking better than hers. It was a small, petty grievance, but in that moment it felt like the most important truth in the world. She lies, Felicity screeched. She's a dirty Omega. Dominic released Rowan's hand and took one step toward Felicity. The pressure in the room increased tenfold. Windows rattled. Last night, Dominic said, addressing the room, my men and I lay dying in a cave on your mountain. We were bleeding out, frozen, helpless, and this dirty Omega found us. He gestured to Rowan. She tore her own clothes to bind our wounds. She used her own body heat to keep the King of Wolves from freezing to death. She saved the crown. A gasp went through the room. The pack members looked at Rowan with wide eyes. Saving the king wasn't just a good deed, it was a divine act. Dominic turned his golden gaze back to Sterling. You threw her out to die. You discarded a diamond because you were too stupid to see it wasn't a rock. Sire, please. Sterling fell to his knees. It was a mistake. We will take her back. We will restore her rank. Take her back? Dominic sneered. You are confused, Sterling. You don't get to take her back. She is no longer Silver Creek. Dominic turned to Rowan. He took her hand again, lifting it high for everyone to see. Rowan has no pack name, Dominic announced, so I am giving her mine. From this day forward, she is Rowan Thorn. The silence in the room was absolute. Giving an Omega the royal name was unheard of. It was essentially a proposal. And, Dominic continued, looking Sterling dead in the eye, she is not an Omega. A wolf who commands the loyalty of the Obsidian Order is no Omega. She is the Luna of the royal house, and you are trespassing in her presence. Luna, Felicity whispered, horror dawning on her face. Arrest them, Dominic commanded his guards, pointing at Sterling and Felicity, for treason against the crown and attempted murder of the Queen. As the guards dragged the screaming Alpha and his mistress away, Dominic looked down at Rowan. I told you, he whispered, a smirk playing on his lips. Fate is funny. Rowan looked at the man who had been a wolf in her arms just hours ago. She looked at the pack that had tormented her, now bowing at her feet. What happens now? She asked. Now? Dominic said, leading her toward the door. Now we go home. I have a kingdom to show you. The journey from the desolate cold of Silver Creek to the heart of the kingdom took 4 hours by armored convoy. They weren't just traveling to a city. They were ascending to the Obsidian Citadel, the fortress city that served as the capital of the shifter world. Rowan sat in the back of the lead SUV, watching the landscape change from jagged ice to lush, manicured pine forests. She was warm for the first time in years, wrapped in Dominic's scent and his cashmere, but a new kind of chill was settling in her stomach. She had survived the blizzard. She had survived the wolves. But as the towering black walls of the citadel came into view, looming like a jagged crown against the sky, she realized she was entering a different kind of danger zone. You're quiet, Dominic said. He hadn't let go of her hand since they left the pack house. His thumb traced idle, soothing circles on her knuckles. You called me Luna, Rowan whispered, looking out the window so he wouldn't see the terror in her eyes. In front of everyone. Dominic, you know I'm not. I'm a servant. I don't know which fork to use for a salad, let alone how to rule a kingdom. Dominic turned her face toward him, his expression serious. Do you think being a queen is about knowing which fork to use. My court is filled with people who know perfect etiquette, Rowan. And those same people would have stepped over my bleeding body to get to the throne. You stopped. I did what anyone would do, she deflected. No, Dominic corrected, his voice dropping to a low growl. You did what a Luna does. You put the pack before yourself. The title isn't a gift, Rowan. It's a recognition of what you already are. The car slowed as it passed through the massive iron gates. The city inside was a sprawling mix of modern architecture and ancient stone. Wolves and humans walked the streets. As the convoy passed, people stopped and bowed. Besides, Dominic added, his eyes darkening slightly, I didn't just do it to honor you. I did it to protect you. As a rogue, you are vulnerable. As my Luna, you are untouchable. Anyone who moves against you declares war on me. Rowan swallowed hard. Does that mean people will want to move against me? Dominic didn't answer immediately. He looked at the main entrance of the palace, where a line of dignitaries was already waiting. There are always snakes in the garden, Rowan. You just have to know where to step. The arrival was a blur of flashes and faces. Rowan was ushered through the grand foyer, a space so large it could fit the entire Silver Creek pack house inside it twice. She was immediately separated from Dominic. Council business, a stern-looking man with a clipboard said, stepping between them. This was Elias Thorne, Dominic's uncle, and the High Chancellor. He looked at Rowan with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. The king has been missing for 24 hours. The council is in uproar. He must address them. Dominic growled, a low warning sound. She stays with me. She needs to be prepared, sire, Elias said smoothly, not backing down. If you intend to present her at the winter solstice ball tonight, which you must to prove you are alive and well, she cannot look like this. Dominic looked at Rowan. She was clean, but she was wearing ill-fitting clothes. Her hair was wind-blown, and she looked exhausted. Go with Elias, Dominic said softly. He is a stiff old bat, but he is loyal. He will take you to the royal suite. I will join you as soon as I clear the room of vultures. Rowan nodded, feeling her safety net rip away. Okay. She was led away by a team of staff, not to a dungeon, but to a suite that was larger than the house she grew up in. The bathroom was a sanctuary of white marble and gold, fixtures. For the next 3 hours, Rowan was scrubbed, polished, and inspected. The head of the styling team was a woman named Madame Leona, a sharp-tongued beta who ran the palace household with an iron fist. She didn't speak to Rowan, only barked orders at her assistants. Condition the hair twice, it's like straw. The nails are cracked, file them down. She's too thin, the dress will hang. Pin it at the waist. Rowan felt like a doll being refurbished. As she sat in front of the vanity, she looked at her reflection. The girl staring back was a stranger. Her mousy brown hair had been blown out into glossy chestnut waves. Her skin, usually pale and chapped, was glowing with expensive oils, but her eyes were the same, wide, frightened, and grey. I am an imposter, the voice in her head whispered. They are going to eat me alive. There was a knock at the door. Enter, Madame Leona barked. The door opened, and a woman walked in. The room seemed to get colder. She was stunning. Tall, with hair like spun gold, and eyes the colour of emeralds. She wore a dress of deep crimson that hugged every curve. She moved with the predatory grace of a high-born alpha female. Leave us, the woman commanded. Madame Leona hesitated, then bowed. Yes, Lady Beatrice. The staff filed out, leaving Rowan alone with the stranger. Rowan knew the name. Lady Beatrice Ashwood, the daughter of the Southern Alpha. The woman everyone in the tabloids said was destined to be Dominic's mate. Beatrice walked around the chair, circling Rowan like a shark. She didn't look angry. She looked amused. "So," Beatrice pawed, trailing a manicured finger along the back of the chair. "This is the little mouse that pulled a thorn from the lion's paw." Rowan stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she remembered Dominic's words. "You are the Luna." "My name is Rowan." "I know what your name is," Beatrice laughed softly. "And I know what you are. A Silver Creek reject. A floor scrubber." She leaned in close, her perfume smelling of heavy roses and something bitter. "Dominic is grateful to you," Beatrice whispered. "He is a man of honor. He feels he owes you a debt. That is why he gave you the title. But do not mistake gratitude for love, little mouse, and do not mistake a title for power." "I saved his life," Rowan said, her voice trembling but firm. "You warmed him up," Beatrice corrected dismissively. "Any bitch in heat could have done that. But governing, leading, standing beside a king when the wars come, that takes breeding, that takes blood. And you—" She looked Rowan up and down with a sneer. "You are nothing." Beatrice walked to the door. She paused, her hand on the handle. "Enjoy the ball tonight, Rowan. Wear the pretty dress. Play the part. But know this. By morning, the novelty will wear off. And when he realizes he has bound himself to a stray, he will resent you, and I will be there to pick up the pieces." She slammed the door. Rowan sank back into the chair. The confidence she had been trying to build crumbled into dust. Beatrice was right. She was a cleaner. Dominic was a king. It was a fairy tale, and fairy tales weren't real. The winter solstice ball was the event of the decade. The grand ballroom was a sea of velvet, diamonds, and power. Every alpha from every pack on the continent was there. The music stopped when the herald struck the floor with his staff. "Presenting His Majesty, King Dominic Thorne." And the herald hesitated for a fraction of a second, a pause that screamed volumes. And his companion, Lady Rowan. Dominic had fought for Luna, but the council had blocked it for the official announcement until a formal mating ceremony could be performed. They appeared at the top of the grand staircase. Dominic looked devastating in a tuxedo of midnight blue, but all eyes were on Rowan. She wore a gown of shimmering silver silk that looked like moonlight draped over her body. It was backless, revealing the faint scars of her hard life, which she had refused to cover with makeup. Let them see, she had decided. Dominic offered her his arm. He leaned down, his lips grazing her ear. "You are shaking." "There are 500 people staring at me," she whispered. "Let them stare," Dominic said. "You look like a star that fell to earth. Breathe, Rowan. I have you." They descended the stairs. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Rowan could feel the waves of judgment, curiosity, lust, disgust, envy. They reached the dance floor. Dominic pulled her into his arms for the opening waltz. As they moved, the world seemed to narrow down to just the heat of his hand on her waist and the gold of his eyes. "Beatrice visited me," Rowan said quietly. Dominic's step faltered for a microsecond. "What did she say?" "She said you only claimed me out of gratitude. She said I don't belong here." Dominic stopped dancing. They were in the middle of the floor, hundreds of people watching, but he didn't care. He cupped her face in his large hands. "Look at me," he commanded. "Gratitude is what I feel for my chef. Respect is what I feel for my soldiers. What I feel for you, that is something else, entirely." "What is it?" she breathed. "When I was in that cave," Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion, "I was drifting in the dark. I was ready to let go. And then I felt you. Not just your heat, your soul. It called to mine, Rowan. It wasn't the cold that woke me up. It was you. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. Beatrice is wrong. I didn't choose you because you saved me. I was saved because you are the one I was waiting to choose. For a moment, the doubt vanished. Rowan felt a spark, warm and undeniable, ignite in her chest. But the moment was shattered. A scream tore through the ballroom. The music cut out. The crowd gasped and fell back. On the edge of the dance floor, one of the Obsidian Order, Sebastian, the beta who had been in the cave, collapsed. He was convulsing, foam gathering at his mouth. "Sebastian!" Dominic roared, releasing Rowan and rushing to his second-in-command. He dropped to his knees beside the convulsing man. Sebastian's face was turning a sickly shade of purple. "Poison," Dominic snarled, sniffing the air. "Wolfsbane, concentrated." "He drank from the toast," someone shouted. "The king's toast!" Dominic froze. The toast, the glass of ceremonial wine that had been handed to Sebastian, but was meant for Dominic. Sebastian had taken the first sip as part of the beta's traditional duty to test the vintage. Dominic looked up, his eyes glowing with a murderous rage. He scanned the room. His eyes locked on a figure slipping out the side door. It was a waiter, moving too fast. "Seal the doors," Dominic bellowed, his voice shaking the chandeliers. "No one leaves!" The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guards swarmed the exits. Rowan stood frozen in the middle of the floor. She looked at the table where the drinks had been served. She saw a familiar glint of metal near the wine decanter. She walked over to it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Lying behind the ice sculpture was a silver bracelet. The same silver bracelet Felicity had used to frame her. But Felicity was in a dungeon cells miles away. Rowan picked it up. Engraved on the inside wasn't the sterling crest. It was a different symbol. A rose wrapped in thorns. She looked across the room. Standing near the orchestra, looking perfectly calm amidst the panic, was Lady Beatrice Ashwood. She caught Rowan's eye, and she smiled. Dominic was shouting orders, his magic crackling around him like lightning. But Rowan realized with a sinking horror that the enemy wasn't just a jealous ex-lover or a petty pack alpha. The bracelet was a message. This was never about stealing jewelry, Rowan realized. It was about planting evidence. Dominic turned back to Rowan, fear in his eyes for the first time. "Rowan, get behind me!" But before she could move, the heavy glass skylight above them shattered. Ropes dropped from the darkness of the night sky. Figures clad in black tactical gear and gas masks descended, crashing into the ballroom. They weren't just assassins, they were hunters, human mercenaries equipped to kill shifters, and they were dropping straight toward Rowan. The ballroom descended into pandemonium. Shards of glass rained down like jagged hail, slicing through silk and skin alike. As the aristocratic shifters screamed and scrambled for cover, the black-clad figures hit the floor with military precision. They didn't shoot into the crowd. They moved in a tight phalanx, cutting a straight line through the chaos. Their target wasn't the king. It was Rowan. "Secure the asset," the leader of the strike team shouted, his voice distorted by a gas mask. Dominic roared, a sound so primal it shattered the remaining windows. He abandoned the convulsing Sebastian to the care of the royal medics and launched himself across the room. He didn't bother to shift. His human form was lethal enough. He backhanded a guard who was too slow to move, his eyes fixed on the men sprinting toward his mate. "Rowan, get down!" Dominic bellowed. Rowan didn't freeze. A lifetime of dodging blows in the Silver Creek pack house had given her reflexes that high-born ladies lacked. As a soldier reached for her, she dropped to the floor, sliding under the banquet table. The soldier's gloved hand snatched only empty air. Canisters hit the floor, hissing as they released thick, purple smoke. Wolfsbane gas. The shifters nearest the canisters gagged, clutching their throats as the poison burned their lungs. Dominic ploughed into the smoke, his healing factor fighting the toxin, but it slowed him down. His vision blurred. Under the table, Rowan scrambled over discarded shoes and broken glass. She saw heavy combat boots stomping toward her. She spotted a silver carving knife that had fallen from the roast platter. She grabbed it. A hand, strong and calloused, grabbed her ankle and dragged her out from beneath the tablecloth. Rowan screamed, twisting her body. A hunter straddled her, raising a syringe filled with a glowing blue liquid. "Don't struggle, Omega," he grunted. "The buyer wants you intact." The buyer? Rowan didn't beg. She swung the silver carving knife with all her strength. The blade sank into the gap between the hunter's vest and his neck protection. He gurgled, dropping the syringe, and collapsed sideways. Rowan scrambled up, gasping for air. Through the purple haze, she saw a shadow emerge. Dominic burst through the smoke, his eyes bleeding gold light. His skin was blistering from the gas, but he looked like a demon of vengeance. He reached the two remaining hunters closest to her. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. With a sickening crunch, he snapped the neck of the first. The second he threw across the room with enough force to crack the stone pillars. "Enough!" Dominic's voice boomed, carrying the weight of the Alpha Command. The remaining intruders, realizing their extraction team had failed and the Alpha King was still standing, triggered flashbangs and retreated up the ropes, disappearing into the night as quickly as they had come. Silence fell over the ruined ballroom, broken only by the whimpering of the injured and the jagged breathing of the king. Dominic turned to Rowan. His tuxedo was shredded, his skin red and irritated, but his hands were gentle as he grabbed her shoulders, checking her for injuries. "Did they touch you?" he demanded, his voice shaking with adrenaline. "I'm fine," Rowan gasped, dropping the bloody knife. "Dominic, they weren't trying to kill me. They had a syringe. They wanted to take me." Dominic's expression hardened into granite. "Kidnapping a royal Luna is an act of war." "It's not just war," Rowan said, her hands trembling as she reached into her pocket. She pulled out the silver bracelet she had found by the wine. "It's a coup." She held up the jewelry. "I found this where Sebastian was poisoned. It's the same trick Felicity used on me, planting evidence to frame someone." Dominic took the bracelet. He looked at the engraving inside, the rose wrapped in thorns. He looked across the room. The smoke was clearing. In the corner, surrounded by guards who were unsure whether to protect her or arrest her, stood Lady Beatrice. She hadn't run. She was watching them, her face a mask of cold calculation. Dominic squeezed the silver bracelet until it bent in his hand. "Seal the exits," Dominic said to the captain of the guard, his voice deadly quiet. "And bring Lady Beatrice to the throne room. Tonight, the Ashwood line ends." The throne room of the Obsidian Citadel was a cavernous hall of black marble and gold, but that night it felt like a courtroom. Lady Beatrice knelt in the center of the room, her red dress torn, her perfect hair disheveled. She was surrounded by the Obsidian Order, the very men she had tried to kill by proxy. Dominic sat on the obsidian throne, radiating a cold, terrifying silence. Rowan stood beside him. She wasn't sitting. She was standing guard, her hand resting on the arm of his throne. "Why?" Dominic asked. His voice echoed off the high vaulted ceiling. "You have wealth. You have status. Why align yourself with human hunters?" Beatrice looked up, her eyes filled with venom. She didn't look at the king. She looked at Rowan. "Because of her," Beatrice spat. "Do you think it's normal, Dominic? An Omega runt who can heal 12 fatal wounds in a single night? She isn't just a wolf. She's a genetic anomaly. The hunters didn't want to kill her. They wanted to bleed her. They offered me half the kingdom in exchange for the miracle Omega. A murmur rippled through the guards. Rowan stiffened. She hadn't realized her healing was supernatural. She thought she had just been diligent. Dominic stood up, descending the steps of the dais. He stopped inches from Beatrice. "You sold your queen for money," he said softly. "And you tried to murder my beta to create a distraction." "I did what I had to do to save the bloodline," Beatrice screamed. "You were going to pollute the royal line with a servant." "She is not a servant," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a lethal growl. "She is the savior of this pack, and you are a traitor." He turned to Rowan. "She is of high blood, so the law requires a trial. But she attacked you. The judgment is yours, my Luna." The room held its breath. It was the final test. If Rowan showed weakness, the court would eat her alive. If she showed excessive cruelty, they would fear her, but never love her. Rowan looked at the woman who had mocked her, who had tried to sell her to a lab. She remembered the cold of the blizzard. She remembered the warmth of the wolves. "Death is too easy," Rowan said, her voice clear and steady. "And prison is a burden on the taxpayers." She walked down the steps until she stood over Beatrice. "You care about status more than anything," Rowan said. "So I strip you of it. You are no longer Lady Ashwood. You are stripped of your rank, your name, and your pack. You will be escorted to the neutral lands. You will survive on your own, without a name, just as I did." Beatrice gasped. To a high-born wolf, being made nameless was a fate worse than execution. "Take her," Rowan commanded the guards. As Beatrice was dragged away, screaming, the tension in the room broke. Elias, the stiff chancellor, bowed low. Then the guards bowed. Then the remaining nobles. Dominic walked back to Rowan. He didn't care about the audience. He took her face in his hands and kissed her, a searing, possessive claim that left no doubt in anyone's mind. "Long live the Queen," Dominic whispered against her lips. Outside, the snow began to fall again, covering the blood and the broken glass. But inside, the fire was lit. The rejected Omega had found her pack, and the king had found his heart. They had survived the winter. Now they would rule the spring. And that is how Rowan went from a frozen exile to the most powerful woman in the shifter world. She proved that true power isn't about the family you're born into, but the family you choose, and the family that chooses you. Beatrice lost everything because she sought power for herself, while Rowan gained a kingdom because she gave everything to save others. But the story doesn't have to end here. The hunters mentioned a buyer who wanted Rowan's special healing blood. Who do you think that is? And do you think Sterling is rotting in a cell or planning his revenge? If you enjoyed this story of karma, romance, and revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next part of the saga. Let me know in the comments. If you were Rowan, would you have exiled Beatrice or chosen a harsher punishment? I'll be reading your answers. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.